Hello and welcome to the Warhammer Podcast, episode 88. I'm your host, Brad. This is my co-host, Eric.
How's it going?
And on this week's episode, a new codex came out this week.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
So let's talk about a different one.
I was like, it means nothing for this episode, but you're not wrong.
So we've had a little bit of time with the Tyranid Codex now, and I think it's time we do our Tyranid Subfaction episode. So let's stop talking here and get into this.
Sounds good.
So before we get into hyping up these subfactions and reviewing this codex in general, let's for a moment address the angle we're going at for the subfaction episode for Tyranids.
Right, because we can't really do it in the same way as Space Marines.
Yeah, so Space Marines we did from a pure lore standpoint. Chaos Space Marines we did the same way. Necrons we kind of did a hybrid between 9th edition's rules and what lore there was. But when we get to Tyranids, there is no lore.
Yeah, there is lore, but it's all everybody else's lore responding to Tyranids. It's not Tyranid lore.
Correct. So Devastation and Ball has a couple Tyranid focus chapters where you see from the Hive Mind's viewpoint for a short moment. I would kill for a book from that angle, but I know since the Hive Mind is like a Chaos God tier entity, they tend not to like giving us those viewpoints of the omnipotent enemy force thing.
It is difficult, but there's no reason that we couldn't get like, here's the subsection leader part of the Hive Mind. It's the current focus of this part of the Hive Mind. And then it doesn't have to be the all-knowing. It can be like super intelligent, knows more than you would expect, but still isn't like a chaos god. But either way, we don't have the amount of, if you're into this part of the lore, it's so cool for these reasons. It's like, okay, they're Tyranids.
Yeah, I can't really tell you what to play if you like Behemoth or Leviathan. All of the Tyranid subfactions are focused on a moment of a consumption cycle of a planet.
Okay, yeah, I see what you're saying.
It's the phases of an invasion.
Yeah, I like that. Phases of the invasion. That's a good way of putting it.
So we're going to do this from a rule standpoint through and through. I'm sorry there's not going to be much fluff talk in this.
I mean, I feel like it's slightly disingenuous because there is lore from the rules that isn't like this whole massive awesomeness, but like there's some cool stuff that is brought out in explaining the rules.
Yeah, sure. From Magic, a top-down design of certain things.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, but rather than go in like strict codex order, so let's talk about the new detachments first and how you can make use of them and our general opinions on them. So let's start off with, to me, the most upsetting of the detachments, and it's Crusher Stampede. I like big Tyranids. I like big monsters. My wife loves big monsters. It's the part of Tyranids that she's super into.
I mean, it's the part of Tyranids that a lot of people are super into, especially with some of the new ones, like very cool stuff.
I have trouble finding a reason to tell someone who wants big Timmy monster smash to pick Crusher Stampede instead of something else.
Okay.
You're usually going to have more fun playing these types of units that Crusher Stampede is advertising elsewhere.
I understand what you're saying. It could have been more exciting. It didn't need to be stronger. It could be more exciting, though.
I think the core problem is in the detachment rule, and I want to walk through the complexity of why. The detachment rule is simply each time a Tyranid monster model from your army makes an attack, add 1 to the hit roll if that model's unit is below starting strength, and add 1 to the wound roll as well if that model's unit is below half strength. There's a few problems with this. 1, this is a detachment focusing on a Timmy, big moments, big experience type of play. This is a more Johnny Spike-ish style of detachment rule. The power isn't obvious. It's not going to be satisfying to the type of person who wants to play Monster Smash.
It very much feels like I read this and I'm like, how do I hurt my own units just a little bit and then go at them kind of thing? And I don't think that's what they were intending. And it's absolutely not what most people would want out of the detachment rule for your monster smash.
So Magic the Gathering, another game we play and have a podcast about that is far less successful nowadays.
Wow.
A long time ago had a very similar failing with a very similar set of cards that failed to please their target audience. Bear with us for a moment while I walk you through this. So in Gatecrash, a Magic set from a decade ago, which upsets me to say out loud, there was a mechanic called Blood Rush. This was on cards from a guild called Gruul, Gruul is a famously simplistic guild to understand.
Girl smash.
It is two aggressive, simple colors combining forces to become the dumbest, most straightforward thing possible. As Eric alluded to with Gruul Smash, I would believe their tagline comes from the Gruul charm, not Gruul, then die, which pretty much sums up the target audience of Gruul.
Yeah, it's simple and kind of fun still.
An aggressive focus, simple faction that is meant to make you want to turn cards sideways, or in 40k, run up field Unga Bunga World Eaters.
Oh, yeah.
Blood Rush, however, was a mechanic that was very finesse focused. It required you to think a lot about the value of a card and when to properly 2-for-1 yourself to maximize temporary value in order to win the game before you run out of resources.
It had big numbers associated with it, which almost sounded cool, but like you said, there was too much finesse. There was too much
non-obvious power.
Yeah, how do you really maneuver the entire game around this mechanic? So like, it could be fun, but not at all what the tagline was trying to sell you on.
And Crusher Stampede immediately reminded me of this, where you misunderstood your audience's needs.
Yeah, it's supposed to be you're playing monsters. You want to play the big monster and you want it to be big and scary, not, oh, you hit it, now it's slightly better.
Especially because this comes with other design downsides that could have salvaged this and just made it a wrong audience problem. I would be less angry about this, but still knock some points off for the wrong audience issue if this didn't also squander the chance to have more interesting rules involved. So if you have a mechanic that requires you to be below your starting strength or below half strength, that comes with obvious downsides associated with it and trying to turn them into upsides. Normally, this would be combined in good game design with enablers. So something where you could double down and go, I will hurt myself for an advantage. And now I trigger my secondary advantage because I hurt myself as well at the same time. So you would do something like have enhancements that let you deal mortal wounds to yourself to pump up your damage output, or deal a guaranteed wound to yourself so that you make a save, something like that.
Or gain movement.
Yeah, where you would have a bunch of these features where you could forcibly turn on your mechanic using these to get a different bonus. And now you've got a very fun archetype that's very underutilized in 40k in general.
Oh, absolutely.
Sisters needed this. Sisters has the same issue with their, if you're under starting strength, if you're under half strength rule thing they've got, and it makes so much sense for you to be making sacrifices forcibly to trigger that.
And I mean, they kind of did something similar with the Demon Pact stuff.
Yes, you're talking about Dark Pacts for Chaos Space Marines.
Yeah, and that was one of those like, yeah, that makes sense. And very much could have done something like that of do damage, get something, and then, hey, now your detachment rule, they're enraged. Now they're even better. And that would be cool. I still don't think I would love it for like being the monster.
No, and that's the problem, is it still suffers from being the wrong target audience. It's just a shame because it failed on both fronts.
I think that it's still fine. It's just disappointing in what it could have been. And honestly, the stratagems.
Okay, so let's talk about enhancements and stratagems for a moment. I know it's the first one we're talking about, so it's hard to understand this, but it has the worst enhancements in the codex.
Oh, they're fucking awful.
They're really bad. And there's some really good ones in most of these other detachments.
Yeah.
The only one that I think is like remotely worth it is Monstrous Nemesis.
Yep.
Null Nodules is like why did you write this?
I mean, psychic matters, right?
We really need to pound on those psychers.
Yeah.
But only once per game.
Oh, Jesus. I didn't even...
Yep.
I just skipped over that and I was like, oh.
No, it is once.
Ominous Presence can be used.
Absolutely. It's just very boring. It's the one that I wouldn't pick in any other detachment. You just don't pick that one.
It's useful in a monsters one because it's like, okay, you're not going to quite have as much swarm to just have massive OC. It's kind of nice, but I don't need to have a big objective control characteristic if my opponent's just dead because I'm a big monster and they die.
And at the same time, adding 3 to your OC isn't enough to take the point from most units.
Yeah.
Like, you're still one model.
You get to like 6 OC.
Yeah. And you're like, cool, I still lose to 4 Space Marines out of the 10 that were on the point. 4 of them stay alive and they still hold the point.
It's like, it's still nice and whatever, but yeah, these enhancements are pretty bad.
Yeah. So then we get to stratagems, and it suffers from something I complained about a while ago. Massive Impact is wasting one of the slots here for what is a core stratagem if you're a vehicle, and also better, because you could get more than 66.
Yeah.
And most things that are tiered in monsters would get more than 66.
Yeah. I mean, it's good that it's here, because otherwise you wouldn't have anything for it, but
It's just awkward that it couldn't have been rolled into the core strat and not eaten one of the strats for this.
it's kind of cool to have the Deadly Demise one. That's fun.
It's fun. That's the type of stratagem I'm fine if it's eating up the 6th slot. I'm okay if you have your fun stratagem. I'm not going to use this competitively, but I will spite use this once because it's funny.
But I would say, like, out of all of the subfactions, I would be okay with there being 1 or 2, like 2 would be fine, honestly, of these, like, it's fun, it does something splashy, I'm playing the big monsters faction. Yeah, okay. But the other 4 probably be pretty good and like more generically useful.
The only one I think you would spam is Rampaging Monstrosities.
Yeah. I was trying to think of like how swarm guided salvos could possibly be useful.
I think Rampaging Monstrosities and Savage Roar will honestly get pretty standard amounts of use. One of them is just reroll hit rolls, and the other one is just +1 to hit, and sometimes you get the +1 to wound when they get battle shocked.
Yeah, those are nice, solid strats to have access to, especially since they're 1 CP.
But this gets into my problem of like, Savage Roar shouldn't be good, because Enraged Behemoths should be doing something. You're spending a CP to get your situational buff your detachment should just be giving you.
Yeah, I see your initial idea of like, this is one of your least exciting ones.
This is personally in the whole codex, I will not get this negative with any other detachment, I promise. It's a rough one to have to start with, because to me, this is the detachment that has the biggest miss from a design standpoint.
Let's move on though. Let's move to Unending Swarm.
On the exact opposite end of the spectrum.
We go from big monsters to all the termagants in the world.
And we go from really bad to really good. So Unending Swarm is an absolutely fun detachment. If you want to play it, you should. Insurmountable Odds is a really fun detachment rule with the whole every time one of your models dies, you get to move D6.
It's the kind of thing that I look at and I'm like, that seems like really, really strong, right? And then I have to remember that like it's still just gaunts moving around. Like it's strong and it's good, but like
you've got Termagants and Gargoyles don't really get much from it. Neurogants sort of kind of not really. And then Hormagaunts love it. And to be honest, Termagants in certain builds do love it, but I don't want to get into like the competitive portion. Enhancement wise, I think is the weak point of Unending Swarm.
I don't know about that.
So here's my thoughts. It's the weak point, but it's not bad. It's just misses the mark a bit for me. Let's walk through the enhancements real quick and my problem with them.
You're gonna have to walk me through that because I think these are pretty good.
They're wrong for the detachment they're in.
So let's start with Relentless Hunger then. It's add 2 to your move characteristics of models in the bearer's unit.
So that one, basic one you're used to in Orcs.
Yeah, it's good.
Let's keep going. Naturalized Camouflage, Tyranid model, up to 3 Endless Multitude models within 9 get cover for the first battle round.
I mean, it's not bad.
It's whatever.
It's a very whatever indeed.
Piercing Talons. Each time a model in the bearer's unit makes an attack, a crit wound improves the armor pen by 1. This sounds very good. Adrenalized Onslaught. Each time the bearer's unit piles in or consolidates, those models can move an additional 3 inches. Well, that sounds pretty good too. Here's the problem. The detachment rule only works on Endless Multitudes.
Yeah.
All 6 of your stratagems only work on Endless Multitudes.
It is a very laser-focused subfaction.
All of your enhancements will never affect an Endless Multitude, except for ones that they give no good effect to. The problem is you can't lead Endless Multitudes with anything that gives a shit.
Okay.
Termagants can't be led. Neurogants can only be led by a Neurotyrant, both of whom do not want to be anywhere near combat.
That's true.
Well, the Neurotyrant itself wants to be in flamer range, but only after it still wants to be in the back line. Hormagaunts cannot be led, which would be the one that you want to get all this on.
Yeah, that really is what I had just assumed and didn't think of.
Gargoyles can be led by a Tyranid Prime with wings for some reason, because they forgot to make the Shrike models.
Huh.
A melee-focused character leading an only shooting terrible swarm that never wants to be in melee.
Fascinating.
So this is where the enhancements are a problem.
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, like, it's fine to have one or two units that aren't, like, you don't have to have your entire list, Endless Multitude.
But 3 out of my 4 enhancements should not be bad on the units that are part of the core fantasy.
Yeah.
They should have been auras that give the buff. I know we're in like a mostly aura-less edition outside of like Tyranid monsters buffing gaunts and stuff.
Except for the fact that we literally have some auras in here later.
I really wish they had gone with like things within Synapse range of this leader or things like that, where it's like, okay, cool, we're piggybacking off of our core rule that's not very good to begin with. We're making it better through our enhancements and being on theme with the detachment.
Yeah.
You could have one. It's like a wild card to the 4th slot where it's like, I'll give this to my thing that I'm rounding out the list with.
Yeah. But having 3 of the 4, I see what you're saying.
Again, it's not that they are technically unusable. It is that they are unusable. You do not want this.
They don't actually work with the rest of what this subfaction's generally trying to do. You can make some interesting things with it, but you're going out of your way to do it. Not, we're all happy and it's peanut butter and jelly.
And again, the enhancements aren't bad either. It's the weak point out of these 3, because the detachment rule is very good. Stratagems are bonkers. There isn't a bad strat.
No, there isn't.
Synaptic goading is niche, but it's strong when it's strong. It's one of those you'll use it rarely, but when you do, it gives you 5 victory points.
It's very much one of those. You're not expected to use it often. When you want to use it, you're going to be very happy that it exists.
Yeah. And then we've got like Unending Waves is basically your I need infinite CP because I want to spawn extra units constantly for 2 CP. You've got Teeming Masses, Swarming Masses, both of which are just generally good spammable 1 CP ones.
Bounding Advance is like...
Bounding Advance is niche, but is super good because of Hormagaunts.
Yeah, I'm just like, that one, I can make use of that one with a Hormagaunt.
Yeah, so when you're playing your Hormagaunts, who have a natural advance in charge, advancing 6 on their move 10.
That's real nice for 1 CP.
So yeah, it is a very strong detachment.
But it is very much you're playing Endless Multitude.
This is a detachment where if you have less than 100 gaunts in your list, you chose the wrong detachment. You would get more out of a generalist detachment at that point. 100 gaunts sounds like a ton. Point-wise, it's not half a list.
And did you read the name? It literally says Unending Swarm.
Yeah, this is the good type of niche, in my opinion. This is where I wanted Crusher Stampede to feel like this for monsters. It's like, yeah, this does nothing for anything except for Endless Multitudes, but it does everything for Endless Multitudes.
Absolutely. I do actually really like a lot of the little flavor bits on this one. It's just over and over again about like the rising tide just crashing over you and there's nothing left and like...
Yeah, for a lot of people, this is the core identity of what they think of Nids and lore.
Yeah, this is very much what I'm like, man. Zerg, Swarm, let's go.
All right, let's keep things high for a moment because I don't want to go crashing back down immediately. Let's skip to Vanguard Onslaught. So Vanguard Onslaught is probably the other high point of these Codex detachments. A lot of people, when the Codex was getting previewed before we got to play with it, were saying this is busted. This is going to be the only thing run competitively. We'll talk about that at the end.
This one has a lot of rules that you look at and go, okay, how do I break it?
Yes, and there's a lot of red flag rules where you read it and you go, this has been broken before.
I've seen this before and it doesn't end well.
So to start things off for the first red flags of sorts, the detachment rule is short, like White Scars is short. Tyranid units with this ability are eligible to charge in a turn in which they fell back. Vanguard Invader units with this ability are eligible to charge in a turn in which they advanced. Advance and charge is a pretty big red flag usually.
It's definitely one of those strong abilities that you gotta keep an eye out on. But that's not the only thing the detachment rule does.
Well, there's Vanguard Prime, which is a secondary rule, which is just just Death Leaper can be your warlord.
which is just fun.
So then we move to the enhancements. Important ones in here, like Chameleonic is just stealth and benefit of cover, which we'll get back to in a minute. Stalker is an interesting one because you can pick one unit and the bearer gets +1 to hit, +1 to wound against it, but you're not limited on which unit you choose.
Right, it's just any enemy unit. At the start of battle, pick one.
It's not bad. It's probably the weakest of the three I want to talk about here because the last one is Neuronode, which is another red flag that we've seen in previous editions a lot. After both players have deployed their armies and determine who has the first turn, select up to 3 Vanguard Invader units from your army. Redeploy all of those units.
Redeploying is insanely good.
Yeah, historically, it's been the best thing for multiple armies who had access to it.
Even when the armies haven't really been taking advantage of it, just being able to redeploy is a strong thing to do in a war game.
And then the strats in here are very good as well. To go through them real fast, a lot of these are going to sound familiar to Eric, because Invisible Hunter lets you bounce back to Deep Strike like a Grey Knight at the end of turn. You get to do it with 2 units for a CP. Unseen Lurkers lets you deny shooting against a key unit and make them choose something else. Hypersensory Silica, for 2 CP, you get reactive movement for up to 2 units that are within 9 of the unit. So it's like a double Mists of Demos.
Yeah, right.
Assassin Beast is literally 1 CP remove character from the game.
It's not, but it is.
When you use it, that's how it gets used. It's precision for your whole unit, which is very strong to just instantly get on like a big chunk of Gene Stealers to insta-gib, like, you know, the captain guarded by a bunch of Gravis armor.
That's the thing, is like you use it when you're like, oh, I'm stuck in with a character I want to kill. Hey, guess what? They got precision. It's dead.
Surprise Assault is the whole +1 to hit with the unlikely bonus for the +1 to wound, just like in Crusher Stampede.
There's no bad one.
It's gas the whole way through. And then we get into, okay, Brad, stop just explaining this stuff. What is a Vanguard Invader that all of these target? Well, a lot of these have the backup of 2 Vanguard Invaders or just any Tyranid unit, which is a nice bonus, versus Unending Swarm, which I think does the same thing, but in a safer way where you literally can't target things that are not endless multitudes.
Yeah.
Vanguard Onslaught just tends to give you a bonus for targeting them. But Vanguard Invaders make up a large chunk of the good melee-focused units. Winged Hive Tyrant is a Vanguard Invader. Importantly, Winged Tyranid Prime is who can lead warriors, and because he is leading the unit has the keyword, so you can have a blob of warriors that are Vanguard Invader keyworded.
That's not bad.
Advance and Charge Warriors, pretty good.
Meanwhile, I'm just like, Lictors are cool, right?
Yeah. All the obvious, Lictors, Neurolictors, the Death Leaper, Gene Stealers, Broodlord, all Vanguard Invaders.
And it is very much like you said, like if it's the melee killy thing, it's probably.
Even if it's not, like whatever you're filling your list out with, like if you got a couple shooting things, like you took a Biovore to score some points and sit in the back line, right?
Sure.
Even those things still get fall back in charge, which is a near 0 for those types of units, but like it exists. It comes down to if you prefer the design of Vanguard Onslaught or the design of Unending Swarm. For do you want to have really strong for your niche and also incidentally has value for what you don't bring of the niche? Or only for this niche do you get the bonuses but they're really strong? I don't have a right answer for that, for like which one is correct to do design wise. It's going to be up to, you know, your players and which one people tend to enjoy more.
For me, Vanguard Onslaught is more of the finesse. It's not really the right word, but it's got more of like the strategy overarching redeploys.
Oh, absolutely. You've got your finesse army detachment and your swarm army detachment.
Yeah.
They have very clear identities.
And I think it's tough because, like, you know, everybody was like, wow, this is stupid good. And it reads stupid good.
It reads scary to the point where you're like, oh no, is this going to need an FAQ?
But so far things have been okay.
We'll get to it at the end. So yeah, Vanguard Onslaught was scary going into it. I'm a big fan of where it's ended up. I think it's very good design, especially if you like spaghetti mouth bugs.
I guess this is kind of neat to just have, like, it could be fun for the Gene Stealer.
If you're one of the Gene Stealer fans, like that's your favorite thing to do in Tyranids, this is the snap pick. You didn't even read the rest of the codex.
Going back to like a little bit of the lore from the rules that you see, it feels very like
the early First Force.
Yes.
The ones going ahead, just like in Devastation of Baal with the Lictor, these are the first things that attack the planet.
Yep. And so it's got like the Gene Stealers part to it, and it's cool. I'm on board. And that's why I do think like the Vanguard Prime Death Leapers a cool part of the detachment rule. Those are the little tweaks that I enjoy.
It's a flavor rule that's fun, doesn't affect anything negatively. It doesn't even really have an impact from like a competitive standpoint. It just makes you happy.
Yeah. But let's move on.
Let's bring it back down to another problem child for a minute. Assimilation Swarm. Assimilation Swarm, I don't have as negative feelings about as I do with Crusher Stampede. I think this might be the weakest of the detachments overall, but I don't think a detachment's power is that important as long as it's got the fun factor, which is why I think Crusher Stampede upsets me more with failing to meet its goal.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. There has to be a certain amount of power. It can't be, I'm going to hit you with a wet noodle and you're swinging a fucking lightsaber around. But I don't think any of them are quite that drastic, so.
I feel like Assimilation Swarm has signs of being that, like, weird last minute thing. The fact that in the Codex, the cover image for Assimilation Swarm has nothing to do with the units that are in it.
Okay.
It's a stock Tyranid photo showing 3 units, none of which are part of the Assimilation Swarm.
That's not great.
And Harvester as a keyword is the problem with Assimilation Swarm.
Yeah, throughout this entire subfaction is Harvester, Harvester, Harvester. Is there anything that doesn't have Harvester in it?
The data sheets.
Because I'm pretty sure every bit of the subfaction is Harvester.
I almost feel like my opinion on this could have been salvaged if like the Norm Assimilator had been a Harvester. It has Assimilator in the name.
I did not know that it wasn't.
That was the question mark before we had the Codex, because everyone was like, well, nothing else is Harvester, so maybe it is.
It feels like it probably should be. It makes sense to me, but...
So Harvesters is like literally the entire list. I might be screwing this up. Pyrovores, but not Biovores.
Great.
The Harusvex, which is obviously the flagship Harvester. The Psychophage, which is the new spaghetti mouth bug.
Yeah, I like that one.
The Ripper Swarm, and I'm done.
Oh, that's not great.
That's the problem. So you've got 4 units in the whole codex, if I didn't screw that up. So Assimilation Swarm. In your command phase, each Harvester unit from your army within range of an objective marker can regenerate 1 friendly Tyranid unit within 6 of it. A unit can only be regenerated once per phase. Each time a unit regenerates, do one of the following. Either gain D3 lost wounds, or if it's infantry, get 1 model. If it's endless multitude, get 3.
Yeah, it's nice.
It's okay. It makes little units of Ripper Swarms into little medics. Technically, it gives you a bonus on your Harusvex that has nothing to do with its identity. It's very strange. Here's one of my problems is, obviously the list of units that are Harvesters are kind of like the awkward kids off to the side who don't have a big bucket they fall under.
It does seem like that.
But here's my problem. The Biovore isn't, but the Pyrovore is.
I hate that.
And if we're going for like big mouthy ED units, the Mawloc has the giant mouth and isn't. The Trigun isn't.
While you were like going through it, I was opening it up and looking through going, the Mawloc has to be. He had to have forgotten that one.
And there's 2 more in the Toxicrin and the Venomthropes who could have been thrown in. People who want to get like super into it will be like, their point is not to eat. Their point is to provide like cover. It's like, just throw them in Harvester so they're in one of the pools. I feel like if we had that, and let's throw the Norn Assimilator in there because it upsets me that it's called the Norn Assimilator and it's not a Harvester.
Yeah.
I don't even think it does anything. Just do it. Its rule even cares about being on an objective, which would work with synergy with the detachment rule of wanting to be on an objective. Let's do that, and my Assimilation Swarm review would skyrocket. I don't think it becomes any more powerful, really.
I mean, it would, because you'd have options, but not in the strictest sense of, wow, you're making things so much better. It's more just you get to tune things a bit more and have options instead of, these are your 4. Do you want them or not?
I'd have a more glowing review of Assimilation Swarm. It's not that it's bad, it's that it's extremely niche while being bad. You can be bad as long as like everyone is happy with you. And I think the one thing that I always hear with Assimilation Swarm and why certain casuals still love it is Ripper Swarms are part of it. If you put that keyword anywhere else and not on the Ripper Swarm, there wouldn't be a fan of Assimilation Swarm. It's just people love Rippers. Just like every Necron player loves a Scarab.
I was just gonna make that comparison. I was like,
yeah, and the nerd Nurgling is the best excuse for Nurgle. The cute little buggy boys are always favorites.
It's true.
And I think that kind of holds up Assimilation Swarm for some people, and it's a fine thing, but I think we could have pushed it a little more.
I think a lot of my problem is the strats don't have the fallback of like doing things other than Harvester.
And this is where like it's built like Endless Multitudes, and if it had been built more like Vanguard Onslaught with the backups on the strats, I think you're right, and it would have gone a lot better that way too. It would have felt less restrictive, like look, I don't know what I want to do, I'll go with this slight flavoring.
Yeah, I want to have a bit of fun with some harvesters, and that'll be cool, and I'll add a few extras, and it'll be, yeah, cool. But because all of the strats are so focused on harvesters, you just honestly, you do lose out on all of the other subfactions having strats that you could have used instead.
Again, if the pool of harvesters had just been twice as large, give me 8 data sheets to play with, it'd be pretty easy to get where over half your list is affected by stuff, and you're like, okay, I'm getting my subfaction rules to really do some work in this list. But as it stands, it's like, I'm going to put in 3 Harusfexes, I'm going to put in 3 sets of Ripper Swarms. Okay, I guess I'm going to force Assimilation Swarm.
It can still work. Like, because you're basically turning them into, like, medic auras, essentially. Like,
because they affect others with the detachment rule, you can make them part of a more well-rounded unit, correct?
It does work. And, like, Reclaim Biomass, I think it was, is, like, another aura of around the Harvester, you can regenerate a friendly Tyranid model.
Yeah, so you can do the double up for a CP. You can make it a cutesy, medic-y. It's interesting.
I like the fact that there is that play to it. It's just, even with that, it's very, very focused on harvesters.
Yeah, overall, it doesn't upset me. I just wish it had been a little more.
I could see myself having fun with it a few times.
Yeah, it's very much like the poor AdMech index detachment.
Yeah.
Where it's like, this is the one you pick once as a gag.
Yeah, and it's fun. I think there are possibilities in the future, depending on how the metagame and certain points are, that it could be competitively a good idea just because of how annoying those types of things are, but that's not a good thing.
Yeah, that bothers me. The only time Assimilation Swarm is the pick is because it's like Harusfexes are unhealthy low in points.
Yeah.
Pyrovores are also unhealthy low in points. That's how you do it. And then it's like, oh, okay, math-wise, this is finally, a good detachment that's not healthy for the game. I don't even know if that would be possible, because if Harusfexes are horribly underpointed, they're also monsters. They also get the buffs in Synaptic Nexus. They get the buffs in Invasion Fleet, which is, we'll get to it.
Yeah, so whatever, but let's move on to Synaptic Nexus.
So Synaptic Nexus is one that I think is my personal favorite. It hits a weak spot for me.
Well, I mean, this is the Brain Boys.
Yeah, I don't think it's that good, but I love it.
I honestly kind of hate it.
I know what you're going to say, and I agree, but I have a blind spot, so I don't care. So Synaptic Nexus gives you the Synaptic Imperatives, which was a thing in 9th edition. You pick between 3 buffs, you get 1 for that turn, and then you remove it from the list for the game, right?
Yeah.
Except there's also a stratagem to reuse 1-on-1 unit, the drill. And anytime there's a Doctrine equivalent, except if you were 9th edition Necrons.
Exception proves the rule.
Yeah. So Synaptic Imperatives, the first one is a 5-up invuln army-wide as long as you're in Synapse range. Surging Vitality for +1 to your advance and charge rolls. And go to Slaughter, which gives you well in melee +1 to hit.
All solid options and useful in the different turns that you need them, kind of thing.
Yes. The enhancements are focused on Psyker/Synapse.
They're solid.
They're solidly okay. There's a reason to run 3 out of 4 pretty often. The 4th one deals with leadership.
Yeah. And at the same time, like, the 3 aren't like, oh my god, this changes everything. It's just like, yeah, I can see that working out.
But I will say, for the leadership one I made fun of, if you're going to try to make Tyranids care about its army rule and actually care about Shadow and the Warp, which I know Eric forgot was the army rule.
No, I remembered. It took me a minute. And then I was like, well, he's talking about leadership and trying to make it work. I connected the fucking dots.
But if you're going to care about Shadow and the Warp, this is the detachment to try to make it work.
Sure. I don't think this is enough.
Battle Shock has issues still. It's better than it was. It still could use some more. But if you're going to do it, this is the detachment. I do think it has generally fine stratagems. I don't think they're crazy, but it has stratagems that you will use, every turn. One of these will be useful. Some of them are more situational.
but that's not a bad thing.
One of them I hate because it sounds amazing till you read the when. Smothering Shadow. Shout out to reading the effect up to the when in reverse order and going, yeah, awesome.
Roll a bunch of d6s and deal mortals. Sweet.
Ooh, anything within 12 of my Synapse creature. Okay, this is the Synapse
Psychic's
attachment.
back, boys.
We got a Psychic CP spender. Oh, it's Doombolt. Oh,
Yeah.
It only works if they fail a Battle Shock test.
Hey, you were just talking about trying to make that whole leadership thing work. Like, right, come on, go all in on it.
So I do have some hype for this detachment, okay? So A, yes, I'm going to jam as many Zoanthropes as I can in any list here. You gotta. I do think it's a pretty good detachment to do Synapse heavy, which also is pretty monster heavy, and just assume your other monsters that you're putting in the list are going to be in Synapse range to make it a better version of Crusher Stampede.
I think that's a reasonable assumption.
If you've got Old One Eye with 2 Carnifexes in Crusher Stampede, they will never get anything because of how numbers work.
I mean, it's not true, but
Okay, 2 Carnifexes will never get anything. 2 Carnifexes with Old One Eye for a very short period may get +1 to hit. So if you've got 2 Carnifexes, Eric, you have a unit of 2 models. You no longer count your wounds to determine if you're lower than starting strength. You must now count models. So now they kill the first one. You are now at half, not below half, so you can get your +1 to hit roll. You will never get your wound roll because you cannot go below half of 2.
oh yeah.
Because for some reason GW has the fetish for under and not at or below.
I blame Magic. It just autofills as
I know.
it's a greater than equal to, it's a less than equal to.
Yep.
You've ruined a lot of things for that monster thing for me. I kind of hate you for it.
It is the one that upsets me. But anyway, so you are more likely to get something out of just staying in range in Synaptic Nexus than to actually play Crusher Stampede if you want to play some Carnifexes.
Yeah.
And just, go to Deslaughter them when you need to, or Surging Vitality them to help them get into combat, or Synaptic Augmentation if you want to be more defensive for the turn. It's fine. Is it better than just playing Invasion's Fleet? Almost never. But I don't care because this is flavored for brain bugs, and I love them.
Okay, but is it really?
Yeah, and that's the problem. It is flavored for it. The rules don't follow.
Right, like there's a lot of cool names and there's some italic reminder text of lore, whatever you want to call it.
And then it never goes past that to the rules section.
Yeah, and you're like, ooh, that's really cool. Literally kill with its smothering power. Yeah, sure. It feels like I shouldn't be disappointed by Psychic in 10th edition, but I still am.
You have the right. We will get to it in the wrap-up period. I agree with you. However, it does have a couple shining things to show off. One, it's still not a bad one to pick if you're going monster heavy if you check your synapse count. 2, Power of the Hive Mind on the Neurotyrant is really fun. The Neurotyrant Psychic Scream is 2d6, Torrent, Ignore Cover, Psychic, which means you get +1 Strength, +1 Armor Pen on this, and it was already a 5 -1 2, 2d6 attacks, so now you get 6 -2 2, which is a pretty good flamer with 2d6.
That's a pretty good flamer.
So really like that for when he needs to overwatch something, all that stuff. Power of the Hive Mind on him is pretty much a staple toy for me. I don't think it's like the best thing you could be doing with your points, but I don't care.
But like, the Neurotyrant's cool.
I like the Neurotyrant in most lists.
And I could definitely see putting Power of the Hive Mind on it and being like, yep, gonna do that.
And for another thing you can do in here, if you want to have a tanky Hive Tyrant or something to go into combat, you just give it Synaptic Control for the DR effect, which is just generally probably the best of the enhancements.
A DR is quite nice, which again brings up like the whole, wouldn't it be nice if you had monster stuff like that instead of...
Oh, we could get into that. But this is where I think this is a more fun monster mash detachment than the monster mash detachment.
It really does feel like it. The more you've brought it up, I hadn't really thought about that. I was just thinking like, yeah, Synapse range isn't too difficult. This isn't like a super focused list. Like you can have some other things going on.
Yeah, you can sprinkle whatever you want in here. And because of how everything is structured, everything should get decent effects most of the game from it.
Yeah, it's not too difficult to plan your battle line formations and your movement to take advantage of these.
Yeah, remember like warriors or synapse. It's pretty easy. I will say it's really weird. The Neurotyrant Lictor isn't. It's the only brain bug that isn't, and it's so bothering me. That's FAQ worthy to me. Just say you forgot the keyword. It's a brain bug. Give it the synapse word. This is very upsetting. Please fix this.
Are there any other lone operative stealth?
Yeah, Parasite and Mortrex is at least, right? And all the Lictors.
Okay.
Or are you saying that is Synapse?
Yeah, that is Synapse.
Oh, no. So maybe they were trying to avoid that?
Because, I mean, lone operative stealth is pretty strong.
It's really weird to me the Broodlord is also not a Synapse creature. I wouldn't use it in this detachment, but it's just weird that the Broodlord, who creates Genestealer cults, is not a Synapse creature.
The thing that, like...
Actually brainwashes societies.
Yeah.
Has, like, the strongest of psychic pulls. Doesn't have Synapse somehow.
Yeah, especially because, like, it'll be, like, on its own. It doesn't need, like, the rest of the hive to...
Which maybe that was their attempt at the argument, but, like, that's the whole point of Warriors, too, is that they can go on their own because they're I think it's just missing, to be honest.
Or there's some deep lore that we just don't know yet, Brad. Have you thought of that?
I'm going to go with Occam's Razor.
Probably.
Is not a zebra. They just forgot. All right, let's finish this off with the tried and true invasion fleet. We saved it for last.
Because we've already seen it.
That could be an argument, but to be honest, it's such a good design. It is your generalist detachment. There is nothing wrong in this detachment. It is a perfect index detachment. It does its job. The codex is out, and it is still competitively in the top 3 or top 2 detachments, depending on which week we're looking at.
And whenever there's something new that comes out, you're always going to see the old tried and true be the default as people are figuring things out that does the best, because it's like, oh, that's just how you played it before, so you generally know how it's to be played again. You don't have to relearn anything. But Invasion Fleet is just such a jack of all trades that it's going to be like that throughout 10th.
Yeah, and I feel like when we get to Space Marines, they'll have the same deal.
I think one of the biggest things for Invasion Fleet is it works with the more well-rounded lists that are trying to take a little bit of everything and sprinkle it in.
It'll work the best with a good stuff list, which, because you work best with a good stuff list, and the point of good stuff is to take the best things no matter the synergy, it will always be better than it looks like, competitively. I'm not going to say it's a home run lore-wise. It's literally meant to be your, I don't care, I don't have a slant, I just want to play my dudes efficiently. And it's fine to have the option.
I like having it as an option, something like this in every faction where it's like, man, I don't know what I want to do. My list isn't like, I'm playing monsters, I'm playing brain bugs. Like, I'm just playing Tyranids, man. Okay, you've got Invasion Fleet, and it's going to do you just fine.
And I think several indexes had this.
It's going to be real nice when the indexes that don't have it get their codexes.
Yeah, but Invasion Fleet versus everything else, and what we've got and what we don't. Let's talk about it all here. Invasion Fleet has universal rules that work on your whole army, which means it's a big boon over all of the ones that are slanted towards one thing if you don't know what you want.
Yeah.
If you know what you want, but you want better rules than are in your bad focused detachment, Invasion Fleet's your fallback.
It'll still work with whatever, even if you have a focused list, it'll still work with those.
Yeah, I honestly think there's very little reason for me to pick Synaptic Nexus over Invasion Fleet for a generalist, but I do it because I like it. I want there to be the slant, and it's not actively awful, so I do it, even though I think I'm probably better off just playing the index there.
Most likely, but I think there is something to be said about getting the DR and that kind of stuff to it.
Again, it's not actively bad, but of the two that are more generalist, Synaptic technically is Synapse based, but a bunch of slant lists, Tyranid lists are going to be Synapse heavy anyway. So you could say there's two versions of this, and of the two, Invasion Fleet is probably just the better one usually.
Because it's just going to work more with the rest of the army, and yeah.
Would you rather have the DR or just straight up have a 4-up field on pain for most of the game?
Yeah.
When we're looking at enhancements.
I know.
Wherever you go with it, it's like, I feel like you can't go wrong with Invasion Fleet. It's just a very good detachment. And honestly, as far as this codex goes, it was not perfect, but out of the 6 detachments, including the index one, Vanguard Onslaught, 10 out of 10 design, Unending Swarm, 10 out of 10 design, Invasion Fleet, 10 out of 10 design. Just because it's the generalist one. It's doing what it's supposed to do.
That's true.
Crusher Stampede is my big hang up. It is the worst.
You've disappointed me immensely throughout this.
Synaptic Nexus and Assimilation Swarm are where I want to have a discussion.
I think Assimilation Swarm's cool.
Here's the problem, though, and it's one that I thought you were bringing up earlier. Tyranids does not have a psychic detachment, which Synaptic Nexus should be.
It absolutely should be.
But it really isn't. It's like, we're the brain bug detachment. Where the brain bug detachment has very little to do with psychic.
Well, and like, I mean, even all of the lore and names behind it.
Everything above the rules text portion is like, this is gonna be oh, it's not.
Yeah, and obviously I want a psychic subfaction, Brad. Obviously I want that.
Here's the one that I think is my problem with Assimilation Swarm. It's cute as a bonus detachment. We don't have a shooting focused detachment in Tyranids. If you want to play shooting nids, you just play Invasion Fleet because of the generalist detachment. That's kind of fucked up when you've got an army with a famous shooting horde and famous shooting monsters that you didn't make a Chronos equivalent to be the shooting detachment. I'm not saying a hugely powerful detachment, but just something where that's the focus. And instead you got these guys are going out to Golden Corral together detachment.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, and I don't disagree. It's just not my interest kind of thing. So that I'm definitely biased of like, I don't really care.
But it's a core thing that should be here and isn't.
Yeah, but I also don't think I would get rid of Assimilation Swarm for it. Like, I'd rather not get rid of any. Space Marines just had 7 instead of 6. More subfactions is free. It costs you 2 to 3 pages of text in your book that you're making people pay for still for some godforsaken reason. I mean, it's also when you have a faction that has enough diversity, it's obvious when you're missing a subfaction that includes sections of that diverse army.
Yeah, if you're going through anything that is, again, we'll say fully fledged, your Eldari, Orcs, Necrons, Tyranids.
We're not talking about Votann or Harlequins.
If we're talking about something where you've got 50 plus data sheets, you should be able to run through and go, do I have my shooting oriented one? Do I have my melee oriented one? Do I have my fast one? Do I have my psychic-y one? Do I have my big one? Do I have my swarmy one? These are different ways that everyone wants to be able to play their faction. Whichever one of those armies you play, I'm sure you were in your head going, oh, my orcs, boom, I've got my, I want to see my Bad Moons equivalent. I want to see my, you can go through your whole list. It's sad that like previously in Tyranids, it was a whole lot of melee oriented ones, and then Chronos, which was both the shooting one and the psychic one.
Yeah.
And they just removed it when it's like, you're aware half of your models are only equipped with guns, right? And brain bugs is a big part of your army.
Yeah. It is true. But, like half of the units just have melee weapons, Brad. Come on. Obviously, we have to cater to that.
The answer should never be, let's have less options for someone to play with their rules for the next several years.
Yeah.
Give them the extra couple options. I'm not saying we have to cut Assimilation Swarm, but I'm saying it's here and 2 very core identities are not. One of them is supposed to be, but failed. The other one is super big to have missed. I don't even know why it's not here.
Yeah, the psychic thing is just 10th, sure. But yeah, the shooting, it's a miss.
It is mostly a great codex. It had room for improvement. I think you've got a solid 4 to 5 ways to play your bugs. I really wish we could have hyped up some lore for different ways to play them, but it's just not a thing with NIDS.
It's not a thing for established lore. I think there is enough interesting rules in these subfactions that if you're somebody who wants to engage in lore and you want to do some type of crusade style narrative, I think there's enough direction that you can flesh it out to what you want, and that can be very fun. But yes, there's no chapters. There's no like, here's all of this previously desired lore that you get to play out now.
I get that, yeah. It's not part of this, but the Tyranid Crusade rules are actually somewhat interesting. I do like Crusade and would like to do some Crusade content in the future, but it takes a while because we would have to run a whole Crusade campaign and wait for enough of us to have codexes out that we can play with our Codex Crusade rules.
Once more codexes are out and we can actually do that and not just be like, one person's got Crusade rules and we're just gonna play with the indexes, it's almost certain that we're gonna do another Crusade at some point, but it's probably a year out still.
I liked our Crusades in 9th, not a perfect system, but I'm excited to do that too.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was a good codex. It's not a 9th Necrons.
No, and it's not a 9th Tyranids either. It's not a problem on either end of the spectrum.
This is going to be the solid 50.
If they release the same quality as the Tyranid Tyranid Codex the whole way through. I don't think anyone will be perfectly happy, but everyone will be content.
Yep.
All right, so I hope you all enjoyed this pseudo review, pseudo subfaction focus episode. Tell us your ideas for things we missed in Tyranids, or tell us how you felt about this style of subfaction episode compared to the less rules oriented, more, hype lore oriented ones. Feel free to leave us any of the YouTube pleasantries. It helps us out.
And if you've got any cool, awesome lists on some of the subfactions that we weren't particularly thrilled by, I'm interested in hearing.
Yeah, if you send me an interesting Assimilation Swarm, I'm open to read it. I want to see people excited for it.
And I want to be excited about it. So hopefully those of you who are out there who are excited can fill us in and
build my excitement.
Yeah.
All right, before we get out of here,
do we have any news?
News-wise, we do have news. Thank you, Eric, for saving me from forgetting. By the time this goes live, the polls are up for all the patrons to go vote on what you want the patron-decided episode for Warhammer and Solely Singleton to be for the season. And we have posted announcement posts for the live episode and the patron hangout for people who pay us way too much money. Though people who aren't in that tier may also be allowed to join us because of what we're doing. So go read the news if you're a patron. All right, that does it for us this week, though. Hope you all enjoyed it. Let's get out of here.
Sounds good.